The cafe lights were dim, the kind that tired eyes find comforting after a long day. Mira, limping slightly, wiped down yet another table. She had been on her feet since the morning shift, and the pain in her right leg had grown worse with every hour. Earlier, she had slipped on a wet tile while carrying dishes, but she didn't tell anyone. She couldn't afford to. She needed every rupee to keep her mother's medicines going and the bills from piling up. Just as she allowed herself a 3-second breath, the cafe door shoved open. A group of loud corporate employees strode inside, laughing, arguing over deals, and tossing arrogance like they were handing out free samples. They chose the biggest table. At the far end of the group was a man in simple clothes, quiet, observant, blending in like the kind of person no one notices. Mira pulled her apron straight and walked over with a tired but polite smile. The men didn't look at her. The loudest among them, Harshad, mocked her greeting, repeating her words in a high-pitched tone to make the others laugh. She pretended not to hear it, scribbled their orders carefully, and walked back with her limp. The quiet man watched her, not with pity but with concern, as if he could see the pain she was trying to hide. When Mira returned with their drinks, Harshad intentionally shoved his glass toward her, spilling it across the table and onto the floor. "Clean it," he ordered, waving his hand like he was dismissing a servant. Mira crouched down despite the pain shooting through her leg. Her body trembled, and she accidentally winced. Harshad rolled his eyes dramatically. Another man laughed. "She's so slow. What kind of staff do they hire here?" Their voices carried through the cafe, and the manager pretended not to hear, afraid of losing business. Mira kept wiping the floor, swallowing humiliation with every breath. When she stood, her leg wobbled. She steadied herself, but the tray she carried next tilted slightly. Harshad reached out, not to help, but to smack it from her hand. Plates crashed to the floor. Food splattered everywhere. The entire cafe froze. Her eyes widened in fear, and she instinctively stepped back as Harshad leaned forward like he might shove her. Her voice broke into a whisper, trembling with exhaustion and pain. "Please! Don't kick me. I'm already hurt." The words were soft, small, but they carried the weight of countless humiliations she had endured silently. The quiet man stood from his seat. He didn't raise his voice or rush. He simply walked toward her, knelt beside her, and began gathering the broken pieces of plate. He moved gently, as though the floor was covered with delicate glass instead of cheap crockery. He handed her a clean napkin when he noticed her hands shaking and asked softly, "Are you hurt?" Mira looked down, ashamed to be noticed in her weakest moment. "My leg, it's nothing. I just slipped earlier. I'm fine." But she wasn't fine, and he knew it. Harshad snorted. "Look at this hero. Feel like saving someone today, brother?" He laughed loudly, grabbing the attention of his group again. "Maybe she's pretending. People like this act injured to milk sympathy." Mira's lips quivered. She shook her head. "I'm not lying, I just can't lose this shift." The quiet man turned to Harshad and asked calmly, "Why does her pain amuse you?" Harshad smirked. "Because weak people deserve to be reminded they're weak." The man didn't react with anger. His silence was more powerful than shouting. He stood up and asked the manager for the bill, not for his own table, but for Harshad's group. The manager's confused look only stirred more suspicion among the executives. As the manager walked away, the man casually glanced at the ID cards dangling from the executives' lanyards. His eyes focused sharply, memorizing names. Harshad noticed and scoffed, annoyed by the attention shift. The man turned back to Mira. "What's your name?" "Mira," she whispered. "You didn't deserve this, Mira. None of it." She blinked rapidly, surprised someone said it out loud. Harshad rolled his eyes. "Oh, please, stop pretending to care like some hero in a cheap drama. You're nobody." The quiet man finally lifted his gaze and met Harshad's eyes with a calmness that felt colder than anger. "Nobody?" he repeated quietly. "If you believe that, then you're about to learn something tonight." He helped Mira stand, guided her to a chair, and handed her water. Then he returned to the table of executives, standing tall but composed. The cafe had never been this silent before. The man spoke firmly, each word delivered like it held gravity. "You don't get to treat people this way. Not today. Not in my presence." Harshad laughed again until the man continued. Because people who hurt others for fun always forget one thing. Someone is always watching. Harshad stopped laughing. The quiet man slipped his hand into his pocket. Whatever he was about to do. It was clear this night wasn't going to end the way Harshad expected, and the silent promise he had made to Mira hung in the air like thunder waiting to break. No one who hurt you will walk away tonight. The kindness she thought didn't exist anymore was suddenly standing in front of her, calm, powerful, and ready to act. That was the moment everything slowly began to change. The cafe was so quiet that even the clinking of a spoon sounded loud. Harshad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Still smirking, but less confident now. The others shifted nervously. Unsure why the quiet man's presence suddenly felt different, he no longer looked like an ordinary customer. The man faced them, not raising his voice, but his calm tone carried authority none of them could ignore. What you did tonight isn't just rudeness, he said. It's cruelty. And cruelty says more about the person delivering it than the one receiving it. Harshad scoffed, trying to regain control. Who are you to lecture us? You're just... The man placed an ID card on the table. Not a regular employee card, not a visitor card, but an executive-level identification with a name that made the entire table freeze mid-breath. Daniel R. Shan, CEO. Every executive at that table went pale. The room filled with a stunned silence so deep even Mira felt the shock ripple through the air. Her hand flew to her mouth. The quiet stranger who picked up, broken plates beside her, the man who helped. Her stand was the topmost, authority in the very corporation these men bragged about working for. Harshad swallowed hard. Sir, I didn't know. Daniel held up his hand. That's the point. You didn't know. Because you don't treat people with basic decency. You treat them by what they can offer you, by their status, their power, their usefulness. The other executives lowered their eyes, trapped between fear and guilt. Daniel placed his phone on the table and pressed play. The audio filled the cafe, the insults, the mocking, the slap of the tray hitting the floor, Mira's trembling voice begging not to be kicked. The entire humiliation replayed in front of them. A couple eating at the far corner stopped chewing. The manager wiped his brow nervously. No one dared move. Daniel turned to Mira. You didn't deserve any of that. You showed more strength, limping through your shift than these men showed in their entire careers. Her eyes watered. For the first time in months, someone believed her pain mattered. Daniel faced Harshad again. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending termination review. Workplace harassment, ethical misconduct, abuse of position. And for the others, your silence was permission. You stood and watched cruelty, and that makes you accountable. HR will review each one of you. Panic spread across their faces. Their arrogance evaporated like steam. Harshad stammered, Sir, please, I was just... You were cruel, Daniel said, his voice steady. And you enjoyed it. The harsh truth cut deeper than yelling ever could. Daniel turned to the manager. She needs medical attention. Call someone or I'll take her myself. The manager nodded quickly, guilt written all over his expression. He had allowed this to continue out of fear of complaints. Daniel didn't judge him harshly, only said, Fear protects the wrong people when kindness stays silent. Mira tried to stand, but her leg wobbled again. Daniel caught her gently. Slow, don't push yourself. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I don't want anyone to lose their job because of me. Daniel shook his head. You didn't cause a problem. You revealed one. He reached into his bag and handed her an envelope. This will cover your medical expenses and your salary for the days you need to rest. She stared at it in disbelief. I can't accept this. You can, Daniel replied softly. And you will, because you've spent too long being strong alone. He then offered something that left her speechless. Once you recover if you want, there's a position open in our administrative department. You work harder with an injured leg than most people do fully healthy. I need people like that, people with heart. Her breath caught. The possibility of a new life she had never dared to imagine suddenly felt real. Meanwhile, the executives stood frozen like statues waiting for judgment. Daniel looked at them one last time. Leadership isn't defined by titles. It's defined by how you treat people who can't do anything for you. Security arrived quietly. No shouting, No chaos, just the silent removal of the men who believed they were untouchable. The cafe exhaled a breath it had been holding. Daniel paid for every table's bill, apologized to everyone for what they witnessed, and offered the cafe compensation for the stress and the broken dishes. He refused attention, refused photos, refused praise. When he walked out, he didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a man who believed kindness was a responsibility. Mira watched him leave, tears still in her eyes but mixed with hope, gratitude, and strength she thought she had lost. The next morning, when she woke up from the first peaceful sleep in months, her phone buzzed with a message. Rest well. When you're ready, your new beginning is waiting. Daniel. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. They walk in quietly, act kindly, and leave without expecting applause.